a joke thread, a weird DM, a screenshot with one detail that doesn't belong. On LurmoStories, we put those pieces side by side. Don't skip. The last few minutes are where the funny stops completely. It was almost midnight when I finally made it to the subway entrance. The train had already pulled out by the time I dashed down the platform, cursing myself for being late. I had missed the last express train home. There was only one thing left to do. Take the local, a slower route, but it was my only option now. The whole city felt like it was holding its breath. The streets were quieter, the dim yellow streetlights casting long shadows. The kind of night that always made me uneasy, but you get used to it after a while. I walked through the station doors and into the lobby, my footsteps echoing against the cold, polished tiles. I was alone. There was no one around, just the low hum of the fluorescent lights overhead and the distant murmur of the trains. The turnstiles sat before me, their usual mechanical sounds muted in the otherwise still air. I slid my MetroCard through the slot, the familiar metallic click and beep accompanying the green light that told me I was good to go. I swiped my card again, but the turnstile didn't move. That's odd, I thought, tapping my card on the sensor a second time, more forcefully. No response. The red light blinked mockingly back at me, and the faint, low rattle of the mechanism sounded like it was trying, but failing to push the bar out of the way. There was a deep sigh from me, frustration beginning to build. This wasn't unusual for the late hours. Equipment breaking down, things going wrong, you deal with it. But the longer I stood there, pressing my card to the reader, the more irritated I became. "Come on, work already," I muttered to myself. I pulled my card out of the slot and checked it. No damage. I tried again. Still nothing. I looked around, wondering if there was someone I could flag down to help. The station, as I mentioned, was dead silent. Nothing but the hum of machinery in the background. I could see the distant, glowing exit signs flickering over the tunnel entrances. No staff in sight, not even a janitor. The time on my watch blinked an annoying reminder, 12:05 a.m. I was starting to feel like this was some kind of bad joke. With a huff, I stepped back from the turnstile and considered my options. The next train wouldn't be here for another 20 minutes. I could try to wait, maybe, hope the situation resolved itself? Or I could walk to another station, but none of the others were close enough for me to bother. I tried swiping my card one more time, just to be sure. Nothing. Now I was genuinely irritated. There was no other option though, so I gave the turnstile a solid shove, hoping that would do the trick. It didn't budge. My irritation turned into something sharper. Annoyance started mixing with a faint undercurrent of anxiety. Why wasn't it working? This shouldn't have been a problem. I had a valid MetroCard after all. So why was the turnstile locked behind me? I turned back to the small stairwell beside the turnstiles, the one that led to the stairwell to the platform, and I considered trying to go around. Maybe the train station had some maintenance room I could slip through. But even as the thought crossed my mind, I noticed something that made my chest tighten a little. The turnstile, the one I tried to swipe through, wasn't just stuck. The bar, the part you normally push through when you swipe your card, was locked in place. It wasn't even moved an inch. I didn't know what kind of mechanism worked on these things, but this was different. It was as if someone had deliberately locked it behind me. My mind raced. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe I was jumping to conclusions. But the idea clung to me, as though something was wrong in the simplest way possible. The turnstile was closed, but not locked from the outside. It was the way the bar was latched that made me uneasy. I started moving closer to it again, my eyes scanning the darkened corners of the station. Had someone done this? It was late, and I hadn't noticed anyone else around when I came in. It felt like I was the only person in the whole building. I stepped closer to the turnstile, trying to pull on the metal arm. Nothing. It felt stuck, unyielding. The same thing I'd felt before, but now it felt almost purposeful. There were still no other people around. It was starting to feel oppressive, like the walls were too thick and the lights too low. I pulled at the turnstile with more force, frustration creeping in again. There had to be a way out, a way around this, but the door was closed and I hadn't seen anything that suggested another exit. No other open gate. Nothing. That's when I heard the noise. A faint metallic scrape, like a wrenching sound, like metal on metal. It didn't come from anywhere specific, but it felt like it came from the very walls of the subway station itself, reverberating through the air. My chest tightened further as the noise cut through the silence like a knife. I froze for a moment, suddenly acutely aware of how alone I was. I looked around again, hoping to catch a glimpse of someone who could help, but there was nothing. No one. I stepped back and tried calling out. "Hello? Anyone here? My voice felt small, swallowed up by the station's vast emptiness. No answer. I couldn't shake the sense that I wasn't alone anymore. I turned back toward the turnstile, my mind racing. What if someone was watching me? What if this was all part of some strange game? I wasn't scared, at least not yet, but I was getting unsettled. I stepped toward the turnstile once more, testing it again, pulling harder. The sound of the scrape grew louder. A crackling sound reverberated off the walls, but there was still no one. No one, just me and the damn locked turnstile. Panic gnawed at me. My fingers slicked with sweat as I tried again. This time I yanked, pulling with every ounce of strength I could muster. Then, to my horror, I felt it. The bar gave a little. Not enough to open, but enough to let me know it wasn't as stuck as it had seemed. Someone had deliberately forced it to stay locked, I realized. Someone had watched me swipe my card, maybe even watched me pull my phone out to look up the next train's schedule. Suddenly, the scraping stopped. A silence fell over the station again. And then, the turnstile gave way. With a heavy clunk, it unlatched, but something stopped me from stepping through. There was a sound behind me, the echo of footsteps, slow, deliberate. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I slipped through the gate without a second glance, stepping onto the platform, feeling every hair on the back of my neck stand up. The subway car I had missed earlier pulled into the station with a hiss, and I didn't wait. I boarded it quickly, without a single glance at the exit. Not once did I turn around. The sun had just begun its descent, casting a dim orange glow over the narrow stretch of road I was driving down. The kind of road that seemed to go on forever without any real sign of human life. Nothing but tall, overgrown grass and clusters of trees along the edges. I've been a delivery driver for nearly 5 years, taking routes all over the city, rural areas, you name it. So when I got a delivery request for a house way out here, on the edge of nowhere according to the map, it wasn't anything I hadn't done before. The address came through on my phone, and my GPS did its usual thing, guiding me from the main highway to some remote residential road. I wasn't concerned at first. The house seemed to be tucked away far off the beaten path, but I was used to these sorts of deliveries. After all, I had grown accustomed to navigating isolated places in the dead of night. The quiet is sometimes a relief. But tonight, there was something unsettling about the stretch of road ahead. I didn't know it yet, but that would be the last time I'd make this delivery. The further I drove, the more the surroundings blurred into a monotonous haze. The trees closed in, forming a canopy that blocked out the light of the setting sun, leaving everything beneath it shrouded in darkness. My headlights were cutting through the thickening dusk like a knife, but it felt like they were hardly doing anything at all. The feeling of isolation crept over me, and a slight unease bubbled up in my stomach. I glanced at the GPS, which now displayed nothing but an empty stretch of road with a small pin marking the destination. The route seemed fine, but the absence of any other landmarks or homes in sight felt wrong. Just a little farther, I muttered to myself, tapping the steering wheel to the rhythm of the low hum of the engine. I could feel the tires crunching softly over the gravel as I picked up speed. The silence was thick, only interrupted by the occasional rustling of wind outside. After what felt like an eternity of driving down this stretch, my GPS blinked with a new notification. Turn around now. I squinted at the screen. It didn't make sense. There was no road to turn around on. The path ahead was blocked off by a dense forest that seemed to close in on either side. The kind of forest that felt endless, as if it had swallowed every trace of civilization. I cursed under my breath and checked the map again. Turn around now. The words blinked back at me, almost mocking, as if the GPS knew something I didn't. My heart rate quickened. I'd never seen it give such a strange command before, especially not on a completely empty road like this. A flicker of doubt crossed my mind. Maybe the GPS was malfunctioning. It had happened before, a glitch, a recalibration issue, something small like that. But still, my gut told me that something was off. This wasn't just a technical hiccup, there was something deliberate about it. I pushed the thought away. It was nothing. I glanced back up at the road. The headlights shone on the crumbling asphalt ahead. No other vehicles, no signs of life, just trees. That strange feeling in my stomach turned into something heavier, a knot that didn't seem to want to loosen. The GPS had reset again. Turn around now, it said, again and again over the speaker. I sighed and hit the button on the GPS to cancel the route. I checked my rearview mirror, trying to see if I could backtrack or turn somewhere. Nothing but more trees. Frustrated, I turned down the next dirt path I saw, the only sign of a driveway. It didn't seem to lead anywhere in particular, but I figured it might give me some space to reverse and recalibrate the whole situation. The ground beneath my tires was rough, the suspension bouncing with each pothole. The forest on either side felt like it was closing in. I just wanted to finish this drop-off and head home. I rolled forward for a while, the headlights casting sharp shadows across the trees, stretching them like dark fingers. The driveway was long, curving off into an overgrown area of tall grass. The edges of the road had begun to fade, as if nature had started reclaiming the space. The GPS didn't update. It just stayed on the same screen. Turn around now. I shook my head. What the hell is going on? I muttered, turning the steering wheel to steer deeper into the brush. The tires crunched over the gravel, getting louder in the empty silence. I couldn't see the house. No lights in the distance, no windows glowing, just darkness. Something caught my eye in the distance. Movement. For a moment, it was barely noticeable, just a shift among the trees. I blinked and stared, trying to make sense of it. It wasn't an animal, no. It was a figure. A tall, thin figure standing motionless by the edge of the trees, its features indiscernible in the dim light. I felt the knot in my stomach tighten. I turned my gaze back to the GPS, trying to ignore the figure. But the words on the screen had changed. It now read, "You have arrived." Arrived? There was no house here, just overgrown weeds and a stretch of road. I gripped the steering wheel harder, my knuckles turning white. This couldn't be right. I slowed down, trying to process what I was seeing, or what I wasn't. The figure, still standing motionless, didn't move. The silence felt oppressive now, like it was pressing down on me from all sides. Then came a sound, a subtle thud, soft, like something large shifting, and then a scraping noise. My head whipped around. The figure was gone. It had moved. Or maybe it hadn't. I couldn't be sure. But I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, blood rushing in my temples. Every hair on the back of my neck stood up. I wasn't sure what had happened, but my instincts screamed at me to leave. I turned the car around, quick, but the moment I did, the GPS blipped again. Turn around now. It was different this time. It wasn't just the usual prompt. It was an order. An urgent one. I looked at the screen. The path ahead was blocked. There was no exit anymore, no way back. I slammed the gas pedal down. The car lurched forward, my tires digging into the gravel. I couldn't afford to stop. The dense trees were now so close, the dark shadows swallowing up the light. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The road twisted, the headlights flickering. I turned into another pathway, hoping for a way out, but it felt like I was stuck in a loop. I glanced at the GPS, now completely useless, blinking erratically, showing me no clearer path. And then, just as I thought I might make it out, a figure appeared in the middle of the road. It wasn't the same as before. This one was different, larger. Its outline was dark against the headlights, but its form was unmistakable. I slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching, the car lurching to a stop. I couldn't tell if the figure was moving toward me or if it was just standing still, but my chest tightened. The air felt thicker now, as if the world itself had become heavy. I felt trapped. A low thud from the forest broke my concentration, and I glanced away, just for a second. That was all it took. When I looked back, the figure was gone. The road, too, had changed. The path I had thought was ahead of me was now blocked by thick vines, as if the entire forest had conspired to keep me here. The GPS pinged once more, one last time. Turn around now. But it was too late. I've been on subway maintenance crews for the better part of 5 years now. A job you pick when you're tired of the typical 9-to-5 grind, or when you've got a thing for mechanical work and dimly lit spaces. I've seen more than my fair share of oddities down in the tunnels, but nothing ever really scared me. You get used to the sounds, the smells, the hum of the systems running beneath the city, keeping everything flowing. That's how I've managed to stay calm in this line of work, focusing on the task and letting the weird stuff slide. But something happened last night that I can't shake. The job was routine at first, at least that's what I thought. It was just another night shift in the service shaft beneath the subway tunnels. The city above had that familiar buzz to it, the kind of hum that's always there, but you stop noticing after a while. The shaft, though? That place is all cinder block walls and exposed pipes running along the ceiling, covered in years of grime. The air's thick with dust and the constant rumble of trains passing overhead. In places, you can feel the vibrations of the track through the walls, like an endless low pulse, deep and unsettling. The kind of thing you just accept, knowing it's part of the whole system. I was assigned to check the ventilation fans that night. A quick inspection of the 3 massive units in the long service shaft. Nothing out of the ordinary. This was the 5th time this week I've been down there, and it was usually a simple process. Check the air quality, test the fan speeds, make sure the bearings are oiled, and note anything strange in the log. I grabbed the flashlight from my belt and turned on the small radio hanging from the side of my jacket. The low hum of static filled the space as I entered the maintenance area at the far end of the shaft. I nodded to myself, adjusting my cap to shield my eyes from the faint light that filtered in from the shaft's lone access door. I always hated coming in here alone. The shadows seemed a bit thicker, the sounds a little more distant. But it wasn't like I had a choice. The crew wasn't supposed to be back until the morning. The first 2 fans were fine, spinning smoothly as they should. I jotted down their speeds in my notebook, moving through the task mechanically. But by the time I reached the 3rd fan, something felt off. The air had become noticeably still, like someone had turned off a giant exhaust vent. I could still hear the faint echoes of the trains passing above, but everything below ground was muted. I pushed the thought aside and moved to the control panel next to the fan. My gloved hands ran across the dials, checking the settings, flipping switches to cycle through each of the fans. The readout was normal at first, but then a flicker of red appeared on the display. Something wasn't right. I pressed the button to initiate a diagnostic, expecting to hear the fans whir to life as usual. But there was nothing. Not a sound. Not even a click. I bent down, half expecting a breaker to be tripped, but nothing seemed amiss. I could feel a tightness in my chest. Unusual. I had been doing this for years, and every time a fan stalled, it was always something simple. But now there was this stillness. It was like the very air around me had thickened, become denser. I rubbed my face, trying to shake off the creeping sensation in the back of my head. A low buzz from the radio made me glance over, but the static didn't clear. Then, out of nowhere, a sharp screeching noise cut through the static, metal on metal, the kind of sound you get when a rusty hinge gets forced open. I jumped back, heart racing. The fans, all of them, had stopped spinning. I checked the other units quickly, hoping this was just some kind of glitch. I flicked switches, slammed buttons, tried every trick I knew. Nothing. The fan blades sat motionless in their housings, and the air had grown noticeably heavier. Sweat began trickling down my spine as I took a few unsteady steps back. The usual hum of the machinery had fallen away, replaced with an oppressive silence, like the tunnel itself was holding its breath. I grabbed my radio again, hoping for a connection to anyone on the outside, but the static was overwhelming now, like an invisible pressure pressing down on me. I could still hear faint train sounds, but they felt distant, as though the world outside was slowly being shut off. I checked the time. It was nearing 2 a.m. The others should have been in the break room by now, but I hadn't heard from anyone. I pressed the radio to my lips. "Anyone there?" I asked, my voice trembling more than I cared to admit. "I need a check-in." Nothing. A faint breeze stirred through the air vents above me, but it was cold, unnaturally cold for a subway tunnel in mid-summer. I shivered as the temperature seemed to drop another few degrees. And then came the sound of footsteps. I froze, eyes wide, straining to listen. It wasn't the usual thrum of someone above ground, nor was it the echo of an approaching train. These steps were too deliberate, too slow, and they were coming from the direction of the service tunnel that led to the tracks. I turned my head toward the entrance, trying to focus through the fog of fear clouding my senses. I called out again. "Hello? Is someone there?" The footsteps stopped. I stood motionless, barely breathing, as the seconds stretched on and on. It was like time had stalled. I waited for an answer, for a sign, for some explanation to snap this nightmare back into something normal. And then the fans came back on, suddenly, violently, as if someone had thrown a switch. The turbines screamed to life, and the cold air shot through the shaft, blasting me like a sudden gust of wind. I didn't wait. I turned and ran. I ran faster than I've ever run before, down that narrow service hallway, my heart pounding in my throat, my legs screaming in protest. The air in the tunnel was thick, stifling, hot and choked with the smell of oil and metal, but I didn't dare look back. I don't know how I made it to the service door. I don't know how I managed to turn the handle, to stumble out into the dimly lit street above. I don't know what it was that I heard in the tunnels that night, or what happened with the ventilation fans. But I do know this: the city's underbelly isn't as quiet as we think it is, and sometimes, the things that lurk down there, they don't want to be discovered. I've quit my job. This was LurmoStories, and now your feed has competition: your imagination. Try not to picture these stories happening down your hallway when the lights go out.